Thank you for staying with us on the program. Now, the speech made by Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu at the ongoing United Nations General Assembly has been sparking conversations at home and abroad. The president, who is making his first appearance in this capacity, touched on several issues ranging from climate change to the wars on the continent, both in Africa and, of course, in Nigeria. Now, he also acknowledged the critical challenges of climate change, persistent global economic disparities, inequality, hunger, COVID-19 pandemic, and the after effect, peace and security, as they all adversely affect the growth of a continent. Tinubu called for international cooperation to tackle these many varied issues and the need to unlock Africa's economy for its benefit and also the overall resolution of global challenges like other leaders have done. Now, my co-anchor here, News Central's Bernard Akede, took a close look at this and gave us a better perspective of the speech. Do take a look.
This is my first address before the General Assembly. Permit me to say a few words on behalf of Nigeria, my country.
Indeed, it was his first appearance in the capacity of the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and all eyes were on him.
There are 5 points I want to highlight.
These 5 points formed the body of the President's message at the General Assembly. Tinubu spoke on the development of Africa, democracy and military coups in Africa, terrorism and human trafficking, protection of mineral-rich areas, and climate change.
Let me go straight to the very first point, which is the fact that he was encouraging investor confidence and speaking to the need for the global community to find it necessary to support the growth of Nigeria. And so what he then said there is to say, look, one of the key challenges that he sees is the need to remove the fuel subsidy and also the exchange rate alignment.
There have already been 2 coups on the continent since the president assumed office, and as the chairman of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, it was expected that the president would address African democracy and governance.
He owned on behalf of Africa that there is a failure on our part in terms of governance. That was the point he made. He then countered it with a second, more like a two-edged sword. To say, while Africa may have failed, you guys at the global community, you have also been reckless in the way you have been involved in this.
While touching climate change, Tinubu made reference to the recent earthquake in Morocco and flooding in Libya, but he also made mention of the plans his government has to address climate change back in Nigeria.
African nations will fight climate change, but must do so on fair and just terms. In Nigeria, we shall build political consensus by highlighting remedial actions which also promote economic good. Projects such as Green Wall to stop desert encroachment, halting the destruction of our forests by mass production and distribution of gas burning stoves.
I think it was quite clear, succinct in terms of, look, Africa, we are not yet there, we are moving on, which is a comment being made, or if I may allude to that. The second part is, look, you guys have your role to play because you've also impacted on how Africa is moving on. And I think that is one way you can demand accountability and responsibility.
This will not be the first time some of these points will be made by a Nigerian president. However, the hope is that President Tinubu's words at the General Assembly will be quickly followed with actions back home in Nigeria.
Africa is nothing less than the key to the world's future. I thank you for listening.
Bernard Akede, reporting for News Central.
Well, we just saw the report packaged by my co-host Bennett. That was the speech of the President Bola Tinubu, his first time appearing before the United Nations General Assembly. Now, we'll further dissect the President's speech, and joining us to do that, we have a broadcast journalist, Jimmy Aina, and of course, a political journalist, Taiwo Olapade. Thank you so much for joining us.
Glad to be with you guys.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. All right, Jimmy and Taiwo, let's delve straight into the matter. First, this is the president's first appearance at the United Nations General Assembly in that capacity. Do you think that he met the people's expectations? Because, I mean, of course, a lot of people were looking forward to that speech to see if he was going to cover the bases of, every single challenge that we're facing as a country and even on the continent. So do you think that he met expectations? Jimmy, do you want to go first?
I would say that he didn't meet expectations, but irrespective of that, I think he gave a good speech, definitely. Probably because of maybe the timing or thereabouts. That's why I probably didn't have enough time to cover everything. But the fact that he was able to portray himself, being, as he said, his first address at the United Nations Summit, but he was able to establish himself as one of those leaders in Africa that the rest of the world can look up to. And I think he did that quite emphatically. And he was able to portray that Pan-Africanism. And of course, knowing that Nigeria's policy, foreign policy, is always, around Africa as well. And of course, tell the rest of the world, his allies and the rest, that Africa is here to stay. And of course, Africa wants to, if business is done with Africa, it must be done on parity, not the usual way where when Africa is exploited or just out. And you see that he also mentioned about Nigeria and the steps that he had taken, mentioning some of those policies, talking about the removal of fuel subsidy, the unification of the foreign exchange as well. And I think it's just to also let those the Western world or the world at large to know that Nigeria has taken really very important step in opening up the economy and inviting them in. So I think while he may not, while I would say that he didn't meet every expectation as we were anticipated, but I think he did well with the speech.
He did, and I like the part where you said that he talked about opening up the economy and expecting investments to come in. He did also mention that the question is not about whether investments, whether Nigeria is ready for investment. It's about how much investment the rest of the world is ready to bring into Nigeria. Now, Taiwo, I'll bring the next one to you. Now, one of the focal points of discussion by the president in the economic is the economic challenges facing today's Africa as a continent, saying that Africa is seeking an equal, firm commitment to partnership with its foreign counterparts to achieve the 2030 agenda and sustainable development goals. Now, the question here is, would you say Africa has friendly policies, enough friendly policies to attract investors, talking about Africa in general?
Well, thank you so much for having me. Hello?
Yes, Taiwo, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the UN General Assembly, UNGA, the 78th edition, spoke about the need for Africa to have a very balanced trade agreement, bilateral relations with other developed society, developed countries of the world. He also spoke about that Africa is open and Nigeria is open for more foreign businesses. And you know that no nation can survive as an island. So you have to have a trading partners, particularly in terms of a comparative advantage. You have to give them what you think you have, and you also have to get from them what you also think that will be of your country. So in that regards, the president was very emphatic as regards the trade imbalance that has existed over the years between African countries, Nigeria in particular, and other developed society, developed countries. And he said he's expecting a change in the narrative in this regard. And that's also the reason why in the sideline of UN General Assembly, the president also had sideline the meetings, including those who are business magnates that followed the president to this very important World Assembly, we are aware that the president in his delegation had entrepreneurs, prominent Nigerians who have done wonderfully well in their choosing careers, particularly when it comes to commerce and industry. We went with them so that in every other area that could be required, that we need to sign a bilateral agreement. The president doesn't need to come back home except to come back here and cement all agreements reached in the sideline of the UN General Assembly. And I'm also not surprised hearing the former NBA president in the person of Mr. Olisa Bakoba also commended the president that for the very first time, we had a president that touched on the peculiar continent at the UN General Assembly, that the president's speech actually was very encouraging and very encouraging and hitting the nail on the head, according to the words of the former president of the NBA, SCN, Mr. Olisa Bakoba. So what I can say that so far so good. President Bola Tinubu has showcasing Africa and Nigeria in particular to the entire world that we are ready to welcome more businesses, particularly from the West.
All right, thank you for that. Also, Jimmy, I'm glad that my colleague here mentioned policies, friendly policies that will attract investment. So we're still talking about investment. And one of the major problems that Africa is facing or dealing with right now is the major issue of insecurity happening across most African countries, especially stemming from, coups and military attacks here and there. What are your thoughts regarding how this issue of insecurity can affect the foreign direct investments that Africa or Nigeria as a country can get from these foreign countries?
Okay, there was a bit of glitch when before you landed.
Would you like me to repeat myself?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, all right. So I was just talking about, my colleague here mentioned friendly, investors, friendly policies to attract investors. And that brought me to asking the question. We've seen the issue of insecurity spring up here and there across Africa, especially because of the coups and the military attacks. And I'm just asking that this issue of insecurity, is it not going to be a major deterrent from getting these direct investments from the foreign countries?
Definitely, it will be, because, of course, and I thought that the president would have said more about issues of insecurity in the country. We've seen that because right now we're not just battling terrorism, there's also the issue of banditry. And if you look at the southeastern part of the country, there's also the agitation from so-called ESN or IPOB members or IPOB members. So that would be a huge problem, because inviting people into your domain also means you have to secure them properly. Now, do you have the wherewithal? That's another question. Do you have the structure? We've spent billions of naira or billions of dollars, if I to mention dollars, in trying to sort out the security issues, and not just this. Even the Tinubu's government, I don't think they've even spent anything. If you look at the last administration of ex-President Buhari, spent so much on so much dollars or so much funds on security, but yet we still have this issue. And of course, every day we have issues of killings and invasion and the rest. The world sees that, especially because of this age of social media, where a lot of things are being put on social media, even by Nigerians themselves. We always put that, and they see it, whether it's true or not. Now they have that perception about Nigeria and our huge problem of insecurity. I think that really hampers any interest from these foreign investors in trying to seeing if they could actually come to the country and, of course, set up, establish the companies and the rest. You could also see that because of this matters, this issue of insecurity, a lot of companies have moved out. Hearing of them leaving, it's sort of discouraging to others. So I think the president will have to focus really on issue of security, because if you can guarantee security, and of course let your visitors know that they are quite safe in the country, their investments will be safe as well. I think that would do well. that would go a long way in, assuring them that they can actually do business with Nigeria. Don't also forget about there's a lot of trap funds in Nigeria. You have to mention the aviation sector, and that's one of the issues why even the UAE had to place a ban on Nigeria. Many of these things, the bottlenecks and the rest, these are the things that he needs to address. He said that, mention it is just, some would say action must meet words. So once the president is inviting visitors or foreign investors in this country, he has to take action in ensuring that some of these things that are militating, those factors that are militating against, proper and proper investments in the countries are sorted out and they can move forward.
All right, thank you so much, Jimmy. And as we roll into the end of this particular segment, I'll ask the last question. I'll throw the last question to you, Taiwo. Now, President Tinubu's speech will definitely not be complete without mentioning the issue of climate change. We've heard about it in the last two COPs, COP27, COP28, and in so many other conversations, both locally and internationally. Now, how do we engage with member states to recognize the impact of climate change while assisting to deliver real transformative results? That's what we're looking at, considering the fact that there's been so much talk about climate change in Africa and in Nigeria, but to be honest, not so much has been done in Africa and by African countries.
Well, thank you so much. The president, one of the areas that his speech focused on is the issue of the climate change. And we can see what is going on, particularly in Libya, in Morocco, even in some part of the West. We have seen flood in some part of the US recently. We have seen similar thing, taking place in the very powerful countries, in the world. Yet, the climate change. So, whether we like it or not, we must be very serious about the concern raised by the president as regards the challenges faced by each country of the world as regards climate change. But the president was also emphatic about the need for us to also tackle our own climate change as regards the way it affects us as Africa. Some of the climate change challenges that we see in some part of the developed societies, like, of course, the recent happening in Morocco, the earthquake, for instance, we hardly, in some form which is very rare, we hardly see an earthquake occurring in Africa. So the president was also talking tackle our own climate change in our own way, that as it affects us, it may not be the way it also affects other countries of the world. But by and large, every other countries had agreed on the need to come together and ensure that we fight the scourge of the climate change, because you won't say it doesn't really affect me. Disaster, affecting a country very close to your own border town. Definitely, people, you may have to see a surge in people moving from a country where there has been a natural disaster to a country that is better than safe for them to protect their lives and property. So there is a need for us to fight the scourge of climate change, but charity begins from the home, like they used to say. What have we done in that regard, as regards ensuring that, of course, let me also give us an instance with what we also experienced last week, Saturday. There was a massive rain, particularly in Lagos area of the country, and many homes were flooded, many properties were lost. We also learned that the flood also swept away an Okada man around the Alimosho area of Lagos State. What are the contributing factors to this? Because our drainage channels, our canals have not been cleared. And if they are cleared, we also see a case whereby people also voluntarily, whenever there is rainfall, we have seen some Nigerians cultivating the habit of also pouring their waste into the drains. Also see people using this plastic waste, if you do a check, a random check on some of the block drains, what we found out is all these disposable plastic drains, disposable, blocking the drains. So we also need to be friendly with our environment, because it's whatever we give to the environment that he also give back to us. So I hope when the president also returned, the message that he emphasized, that he reiterated at the UN Assembly, he also come back to Nigeria and meet with state governors as regards ensure that we do not have any major challenge or disaster coming from the way we have been experiencing climate change factor in some other part of the world.
All right, thank you so much, Taiwo. Thank you so much, Jimmy, as well. Definitely, just like Taiwo rounded up, and like I said at the end of that report as well, the president has said the much he can say at the UN General Assembly. Now it's time for us to see what he will do concerning these issues when he comes back home in Nigeria and, of course, across the continent. Thank you so much, gentlemen, once again for joining us.
Well, you're still watching Report Desk Africa, and we are far from done. So in case you're just joining us, yeah, you've missed the first half, but we're going straight into the Kano State Election Tribunal, the decision, what the verdict has caused in Kano State. We're going to be discussing that very shortly after this break, so stay tucked in.